Welcome. Glad you guys are here with us today. Excited to continue learning about the soil that's best for our soul. We've been going through the parables that Jesus spoke. If you're unfamiliar with what that means, Jesus told these fictional stories to get points across. And today's gonna be a good one. We have two neighbors. That's kind of a dumb way to say that. Obviously, you got one on each side. On one side, though, we have a neighbor, an older gentleman who has needs some physical help, and so he's got a German Shepherd dog that he keeps, not on leash, but he has a shock collar, but he has him there for self-defense and protection because he's an older gentleman who would need that. And from a distance, we always see the dog like we call him the guard dog. I got 3 little boys, 5, 7, and 9 this week. And so like trying to teach them like, hey, dogs are cool, but sometimes you gotta be careful because dogs can be a little bit dangerous. And this past week, one of my kids came in. They were outside supposed to be playing basketball, and they came in, and they're like, hey, we're out playing with Bandit. And I'm like, who's Bandit? I don't know what Bandit is. Like, what are we talking about here? And Bandit is the neighbor's dog's name. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's go out there and see what's going on here. And so they're out in the front yard with this gentleman's dog. The dog's very friendly. They're playing, having a good time. And so now I'm on guard with this guard dog because at the end of the day, as nice as this dog is, he is there trained to do a job, and that's to protect this man. And so if my little boys do something on accident that triggers this dog the wrong way, as we know, there is danger right around the corner in that situation. And as the father that loves them deeply, I don't want that danger to happen to them. And so now I'm there the whole time with them. We're hanging out talking. It was a great time. The dog is very friendly and happy, but he's a big dog, bigger than my kids, and he's there to do a job at the end of the day. And so I don't want my kids to experience any physical danger in life, right? I don't want them to experience any emotional danger, any spiritual, any relational. Obviously, that's going to happen, but if there's something I can do, especially in this phase of their life, to protect them from physical danger, you better believe I'm going to do it, right? That's my number one priority right now in this season, is to keep them safe. And I think there are times in life where right around the corner, if we're not mindful and careful, there are things that are very, very dangerous to our soul that we are not aware of. My kids in that moment were not aware of the danger that could have happened with this dog. They weren't exactly aware of, like, if I just do the wrong thing, like, it's going to set him off in his training to protect our neighbor. And so for our souls, we have a good Father who wants us to not experience danger, but to stay away from danger, whether that is physically or relationally or emotionally or even spiritually. And for our souls, we have a good Father who wants us to learn from his wisdom, who wants us to learn from his insight and how he created and designed life so that you and I would have less experiences of pain and danger. Now, we're not going to avoid all of it, right? Life is broken. Life is full of sin. There are times where we will go through seasons or moments of pain and suffering, or there will be danger that we cannot avoid. But the point is, whatever we're walking through or experience, there are better ways that we can walk through them if we will listen to God's wisdom. If we will listen to God's way as the creator of the universe, who designed things, who knows our souls, who knows what's best for you and I, then we can walk through them a little bit differently. And I think one of the biggest dangers that we don't realize is right around the corner for our soul is unforgiveness. I think when we talk about this idea of soil, for the good soil for our souls, we can say forgiveness. Yeah, that makes sense. Forgiveness is, in theory, it's a good idea. I think most people understand that, but I don't think most people realize the danger that unforgiveness is. And it is right around the corner for every single one of us. And here's what I would kind of say, a couple things to set us up, that choosing unforgiveness is one of the most dangerous things we can do to ourselves. That if we hold on to hurts and to wrongs and how people do things to us, if we choose, now I'm mindful of this word today. I'm talking a lot about choosing because it is a choice, what we choose to do. But when we choose unforgiveness, it is one of the most dangerous things when people hurt us or wrong us. Right? Now, there are differences in the level of offense, right? And even there's, I was thinking like direct and indirect offense, like you step on my toes, you hurt me personally, or you could indirectly step on somebody's toes that I love, family, friend, or whatever, and you've hurt them, so now you've hurt me, right? Directly, right? There is small offense, and then there is big offense. There's offense that takes years to process through and healing. They call it little t trauma and big T trauma, right? It's like that needs some real work. This still needs some work, but it's not as bad, right? Regardless of the level of offense, regardless if it's indirect or direct, choosing unforgiveness with that offense is one of the most dangerous things. And here's what I would say, that if we don't choose to forgive people, no matter how small or big the offense is, it will destroy us. It will eat away at our souls. It is poison to us. And so with this idea of having good soil for our souls, Jesus wants you and I to not have souls that are self-inflicted, full of pain and destruction, because we choose unforgiveness instead of forgiveness. And Jesus is going to teach us today through this parable, through this story. We'll be in Matthew 18 is where we'll be mostly today, that man, forgiveness is the better way. And there's a couple of different reasons why, which we're going to get into, but then there's some even kind of disclaimers of how it functions. And so we'll be in Matthew 18 primarily today. The notes are on the YouVersion app if you want to click there as well. I know last week there were some issues with it not loading properly, but I think it is working this morning. But Matthew 18, Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or my sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? So just real quick to kind of set the stage, like culturally back then, for what was taught and what was accepted, like the agreed upon terms in the Jewish culture was that when someone offends you over something, the standard is 3 times I'll forgive you. 3 times was like accepted. That was what was taught. That was normal. It's like, okay, I messed up here, but I got 3 strikes, right? And that's kind of the agreed upon thing. It was like per incident. Now that's another thing we're not really going to get into today, but it's 3 times not per person. It's 3 times per incident per person, which is like makes it a little bit bigger, right? It's not just 3. And so when we get into this, the multiplication of things gets higher. The number gets even crazier. And so what was normal was 3. And so Peter says, hey, Jesus, what about 7? Like that seems like a pretty good church answer, right? Like that's like more than double, right? If my math is correct, right? 3 plus 3 is 6. So therefore 7 is more than double. Like that's a pretty good answer. Will that suffice, Jesus, for forgiving somebody who has offended me? Is that good enough for what you would say? But Jesus answers in verse 22, I tell you, it's not 7 times, but it's 77 times. Now, if you grew up in the church, maybe you're used to a different translation. Some are like, wait a second, I thought that was. Some translations, when they look at the Greek and the breaking down of this phrasing that Jesus said, 77 times, sometimes it'll say 7 times 77, which is a much larger number, but still both are large numbers. The point is less about, is it 77? Is it 7 times 70, which is then 490? That's not the point, okay? So let's not get held up on that. You choose the translation and the breakdown that you want to go with, okay? For today, we're just going to say 77. The point is not exact number and to have an exact calculation. Well, Jesus, because then I can count up to that number, right? And then I know. The point is that Jesus is drawing a huge number. 3 was normal. So 77 compared to 3, there is no comparison. Jesus is beginning to teach a point to his disciples and to you and I that followers of Jesus aren't supposed to limit how many times we choose. Again, that word choose forgiveness. We are to forgive and keep on forgiving. That's the point Jesus is trying to make here. Say, hey, you want to talk about forgiveness? Okay, well, let's talk about it. Followers of Jesus are not supposed to limit it. We're not supposed to put a number on it. Is it 3? Is it 7? I'm going to keep a tally mark, and I'm going to get to 77 one day, right? Per person per incident, which, again, you do per person per incident. That's hundreds. You say 490, if that's your translation. Like, that number will never be met. 77 times. I just imagine that. Like, I did the math. That 52 weeks in a year, that's another 25 weeks. That would be as if somebody offended me for the same incident. Remember, the same incident once a week for a year and a half straight. And like that's hard to imagine that somebody could do that, number one. But number two, like I just think like, man, I have a hard time forgiving somebody over one offense. One time, one offense, one day, a year. And Jesus is saying, no, 77 times, a year and a half straight, once a week. Imagine the pain. Like, Jesus, that sounds insane. That sounds impossible. There is no way that you can really expect me to live up to that standard, but that's the standard that Jesus is setting. You think 3 is enough. And there is a there's a deeper reason why, which we're going to continue to get into. And he was using this large number because this is ultimately what he wanted to teach us, is that there is no end to how many times we should forgive. Because, where we started today, if we choose not to forgive, there is danger around the corner. There is a German Shepherd around the corner. If we choose not to forgive an offense. So he gives this very straight up, direct answer. You better be ready to forgive a whole lot. And then he begins to teach the parable about the depth of which we forgive. Of how, okay, well, sure, maybe small offenses, right? But what about the big ones? And this is the story that he begins to tell to help us understand just how therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. So a couple quick things here. There's two things. We're going to come back to verse 23 at the very end of our time this morning at the end of the sermon. But the first thing that to see here from this verse, and this is super important, he says the kingdom, look at this, the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven. The point is, as citizens of God's kingdom, followers of Jesus are called to operate by a different set of standards than the rest of the world. When he says the kingdom of heaven, he's saying that means there is a heavenly kingdom and then there is an earthly kingdom. And people who follow Jesus, we are not citizens of earth, we are citizens of heaven. And so it's like in America, I'm not worried about the rules Canada has for their citizens. That's their, you know what I mean? That's their land. They do how things they want to do. I'm not worried about how Europe does stuff with their countries over there. I live in America. I live here in Florida. This is our territory. And so these are the rules that I follow based off of what our government says. We don't worry about other governments. And what he's saying is, ultimately, at the end of the day, really it's not even about our earthly government. It's about our heavenly government. We are heavenly citizens. And so as Jesus, as king, he's saying there is a different set of standards and operations that I'm going to call you to. Now that's for everything in life. So this isn't the point, but it's like, man, how we spend our time, how we manage our finances, how we manage our relationships, how we view and respect people, the way we show kindness to others, our addictions, right? You want to talk about alcohol, looking at sex, inside, outside of marriage, all those conversations that are like the gray areas. Culture's going to say one thing. Our flesh is going to say one thing, but as citizens of kingdom, we don't follow those. We follow what God says. We follow his word and wisdom, and that also includes forgiveness. Because the world around us is going to say, nah, be vengeful, right? An eye for an eye. Man, like, let's get some payback. Let's be angry. Let's hate that person. Let's cancel that person, right? That's what's normal in society today. And so Jesus is reminding us, look, we don't operate by what everybody else operates by. We are not citizens of earth. We are citizens of heaven. There's a different standard. And so he continues on as though this king of this, who has all these accounts, he wants to settle things with his servants. And as he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. So the king, he's got the servant. The servant owes 10,000 bags of gold. Now again, go back to the translation thing. A lot of translations don't say gold. They just say 10,000 bags or 10,000 talents. Maybe if you're looking at your Bible and you're like, well, mine says talents. Talents is just, it's a bag of money. It's the best way to look at that, okay? Now, I don't want to, this isn't the point of it, but to draw culturally to understand this idea of 10,000 bags to get an idea in our head about what that looks like. People way smarter than me. I read a couple different commentaries. People have some different thoughts on it. Well, if it was silver, that's one amount. If it was gold, that's another amount. But even on the conservative side, 10,000 talents, what that looked like to denarii, to the day labor, to your year's wage, all that kind of stuff. Okay, the conservative side that most people agree is this is talking about millions of dollars in today's standard. Some will say if it's 10,000 bags and it's gold, you're talking about billions of dollars in today's money. We don't really know, okay? Pick the number you want. The point isn't the number. The point that we are trying to look at is that Jesus is making the statement that this man owes the king an amount that he cannot pay back. He owes an amount that cannot be made right on his own. millions of dollars, billions of dollars, I'm working for the rest of my life for this man. That is an eternal amount of payback. I can never make that right. This is where the man is, and he's getting to the second half of forgiveness. The first half is 77 times. Don't count. The point isn't how many, you just keep forgiving. The second half is the depth, because we always want to ask this question. We always want to ask, hey, why should I forgive them when they hurt me so deeply? And maybe there's a different version of you'd say that, well, they hurt them so deeply. They hurt my spouse so deeply. They keep messing up so often. There is a deep, deep wound, right? This is, again, the heavy scars, the capital T trauma of the things that we have unfortunately walked through in life. And we'll ask this question, well, why should I forgive them? They hurt me so deeply. There are these wounds that they'll never be able to pay back. They'll never be able to make that right. And that's the point Jesus is making. It's not about the money. It's about forgiveness is what we're talking about here. So don't let the number get you sidetracked. The point is, this man owes this king an amount he can never pay back. So this is the point of the story. He continues on, verse 25. Since he was not able to pay, obviously, as we've just discovered, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. But watch this. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Please be patient with me, he begged. I will pay back everything. But the servant's master took pity on him, and instead he canceled the debt and let him go. Again, it's not a financial point that Jesus is making here. He's got a debt. He owes something. The accounts are not fixed. The relationship is off. And the man was never going to be able to fix the amount that was wrong in this situation. And that is the reality when it comes to offenses, is that an offense cannot be undone. No matter how great or how little, how often, or how infrequent, if something happens, it cannot be undone. But it can be forgiven. So when someone steps on my toes, or your toes, or indirectly they step on someone you love's toes, until we figure out time travel, right, with Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, until that becomes a reality, an offense cannot be undone. We cannot go back and undo it, unsay it. As bad as we may feel, as hurt as people may be, it cannot be undone. There's no going back. But the point Jesus is making is there is going forward. There is moving forward. How do we handle this? How do we move forward with this situation? And that's the point that Jesus is trying to draw home. No matter how many times it takes, it's not 3, it's 77. No matter how deep the wound is, if it's something that can never be paid back, we are still supposed to choose forgiveness. Because again, as citizens of his kingdom, that's what is before us. That's the calling before us. Everybody else is going to say, that doesn't make sense. Why would you forgive them of that? Why would you not cancel that person? Why would you not hate that person? Why would you ever think twice about, because, sorry, man, I don't operate. This is not, I've got a different leader. I've got a different king who's calling me to a different standard of living, of how I'm supposed to forgive people. And so we're called to this because it's better soil for our souls. It's a better experience for everyone involved. It's better for them and it's better for me. And we'll continue that. Watch what I mean. Verse 28 happens. This is funny. When the servant went out, who was just forgiven of this amount that he couldn't pay back, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. Not 10,000, 100. So that's an amount that can be paid back. It might be a large amount, but that's an offense that's not near as big. And what happens? He grabbed him and he began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. He was forgiven of something he can never pay back. And as soon as somebody wrongs him, he reacts in anger and bitterness and hatred and choosing unforgiveness. So familiar, doesn't it? For you and I have been forgiven of so much That God would love us so deeply, yet it's so easy for us to hold on to grudges against people? Is that just me? Like, it's so easy, like, man, I have offended God so deeply, I can never pay back God what I owe him. But yet he chose to forgive me. So who am I to hold on to this grudge to that person? Who am I to stay angry about? Who am I to choose hatred? You see, the best way to forgive is by remembering what we have been forgiven of. Now, this is important because if we stay here, we become like a prisoner to our own past, right? Where it's like, well, I've been forgiven so much because I'm a piece of crap, because I've done this, because I've done that. And that's not what I'm saying. You remember your past, but don't dwell on your past. Don't stay in your past. You remember your past to give you perspective, like, thank God that he rescued me from this. Thank God that I'm not this person anymore, that he has forgiven me of this. And so when whoever offends me for whatever reason, no matter how hard they step on my toes or how many times they do it, I'm going to choose forgiveness because God has forgiven me of so much. So we remember our past. That helps us forgive others. And at the same time, we can't dwell on our past. We also can't dwell on the past of other people. Because if we're dwelling on the past, well, yeah, I remember this or I remember that, right? That's not really forgiving them. That's still holding it over their head, even if they don't know you're holding it over their head or talking about them, right? That's one of the weird things for me, being a pastor in the town where I grew up. It's like, man, some of y'all knew me when I was 12 or 15, right? It's like, good night. Hopefully you didn't, you know what I mean? But it can be a weird thing, right? We love to hold people's past over their heads. But that's not forgiveness. We remember our own past. I should forget their past. It doesn't matter what they did, because look what I did. Look what Jesus has forgiven me of. Who am I to judge? Who am I to hold a grudge? So we remember so we can continue to move forward. And so the story continues. So you've got the first servant. He's choking out his other servant because he owes him $100 or 100 bags or whatever the amount is. He's choking him out. And so this guy who's getting choked, he falls on he's begging, hey, be patient with me and I will pay it back. It's what he just said to the king. He says the same thing that he just said to the king. But what did he do? He didn't let it go. What did he do? He refused, and instead he went off. He had the man thrown into prison until he could pay back the debt. You know what's so ironic about this? The point that Jesus is trying to make is that even though he was throwing the man in prison, when we choose unforgiveness, we're throwing ourselves in prison. This commentary theologian guy, Warren Wiersbe, it's an interesting last name, Warren Wiersbe, he kind of said this. I'll just read this because his words were better than mine. The world's worst prison is the prison of an unforgiving heart. If we refuse to forgive others, then we are not only imprisoning ourselves and causing our own torment, but some of the most miserable people are those who will not forgive others. They live only to imagine ways to punish the people who have wronged them, but they are really only punishing themselves. This is the better way that Jesus says, listen, choosing unforgiveness, it's around, that German Shepherd's around the corner. There's danger around the corner. It's not actually better for you to not choose forgiveness. Choosing unforgiveness is choosing to punish and imprison your own soul. That's the point Jesus is making. We think it's better. They don't deserve my love and kindness and forgiveness. They don't. But they're actually not getting punished. We're punishing ourselves when we do this. By not letting go, we're actually rejecting the freedom that Jesus is trying to bring to a situation, and we're choosing chains. So verse 31 continues, when the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged, and they went and told their master everything that happened. Side note, like everybody sees our actions. So like as followers, as citizens of the kingdom, right? As followers of Jesus, people will see how we live, our actions, how we treat people, if we mess up or if we, whatever. People will notice all that. But I think what stands out louder to people is the hypocrisy that we carry, like this man who was just forgiven of so much. And everyone's like, bro, you were just forgiven of 10,000. You're not going to forgive him of 100? It's not about being perfect. but it's about repenting and falling on our face and not living a life of hypocrisy. Nobody's perfect. We're all going to screw things up and mess up. The issue wasn't that this man got angry. The issue was that this man held on to it. And in his hypocrisy, held on to his anger and held on to his pride. Everybody will notice that. And that's what's crazy. Everybody knows what happened. They're outraged. They told their master everything that had happened. In verse 32, Jesus kind of begins to wrap things up here. Then the master called the servant in. He said, "You wicked servant." So going back to the original master, right? The king in the story. "You wicked servant," he said, "I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" And in his anger, the master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. And then Jesus says this to finish out the parable. "This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart." There's a very sobering summary to the story. And some are, well, what does that mean? Is God going to torture us? Is God going to send us to hell? Like, what is? And I think like those are kind of not the point Jesus is making. There's a couple of thoughts I have to kind of summarize these last few verses that I think best explain, based off what I've read and based off what Jesus is trying to teach here. He's saying a lot, okay? Here's ultimately what it boils down to. First, these statements show just how serious Jesus was about forgiveness. He did not take it lightly. First, on the amount of times, 77 times compared to 3, which was normal. You forgive, and you forgive the next time, and the next time, and you don't keep count. You're upset about something, you forgive. That's the point. And you do it no matter how deep the offense is, no matter how bad somebody has stepped on your toes, whether it's a friend or a family member, a spouse, a coworker. Forgiveness is the calling, and Jesus was serious about it. It's what we're called to do as citizens of his kingdom. It is the standard of operations for us. And it is better for us. There's a German shepherd around the corner if we choose not to, is why Jesus is telling this. It is our calling. There's no offense that is too big. That Jesus was serious about forgiveness. The second thing I would say that if someone is unwilling to choose forgiveness, what Jesus is saying here is it leaves a question about where their citizenship ultimately lies. I don't say that to cast like seeds of doubt, like, oh man, am I really saved if I've never forgiven somebody, if I hate somebody, if I'm mad about something still? That's not what I'm saying. The next point will help clarify a little bit. But what I'm saying is like when we intentionally choose unforgiveness, I am going to stay angry. I am not going to show any compassion or love or any kind of kindness. I think what Jesus is saying is ultimately like you just got to have to wrestle with that. Like, am I wrestling with this or am I intentionally choosing this? Is it a struggle? Like, where is this at with me? And I think the next point that I would say is that choosing forgiveness, it doesn't mean it will be easy. Let me say that. Okay? Now choosing, and again, this is the word choosing. If we choose unforgiveness, we are rejecting Jesus as our king. It's like, okay, well maybe I'm not really a citizen of the kingdom of heaven or of the heavenly kingdom because I'm rejecting what he would have for me. I'm rejecting what he would tell me to do in this moment. It's like, are you obeying or not? I don't know. It's like we talk to our kids. It's like, hey, I just told you what to do. You're not doing it now. So it's like, you're not obeying. So we can wrestle through it, though, and I think that's okay. We can struggle through it. Forgiveness will be difficult. Somebody hurts us. They wrong us. It's not guaranteed to be easy. Jesus never said that. The command wasn't like, go skip along as you do it and go find your pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like, no. It wasn't that way. It's like, man, let's be clear. It'll be difficult. There will be days. There will be seasons, there will be moments, there will be struggles. If we're going to be honest, there'll be times where it's like, I don't want to forgive, but I know Jesus is calling me to, so I have to extend it anyways, even though I'm still struggling through it. And sometimes that deep cut, that deep wound, that big T trauma, sometimes that requires years to find full healing from. it takes counseling. It takes a lot of processing and a lot of godly friends and a lot of Jesus work and a lot of Jesus healing within to come to the other side of that. And it will not be easy just because Jesus tells us to do it. So I want, like, maybe if you're like, well, man, I know I need to forgive this person. I don't want to choose unforgiveness anymore. But golly, that's hard. Yes, that's the point. It will be difficult. It won't be easy necessarily. And then the follow-up to that one, I think, on a very practical note, is that choosing forgiveness doesn't mean the relationship will be the same. So, like, healthy boundaries are a very real thing. Sometimes, like in extreme cases, like if you've walked through divorce, for example, like your relationship's not the same anymore, but yet choosing forgiveness or unforgiveness is still the choice to make. The relationship is not the same, okay? Something extreme as abuse. The relationship should not be the same. But not choosing forgiveness in that situation, I don't say this to say it lightly, I'm just like, let's just be clear about this. Not every relationship stays the same. Now, in the instances where you're trying to have healing in that relationship, yeah, I mean, if that's the situation, but sometimes the person's moved away. Sometimes the person has died, and we're still holding on to things. We talked about this a little bit last year in our series on mental health. Sometimes we have to forgive people who've been dead for 50 years. They're gone, but we're choosing unforgiveness. We're choosing that imprisonment that Jesus talked about. So it doesn't mean the relationship will be the same. Healthy boundaries, hey, I'm not mad at you. I can't be in close proximity with you in the same way anymore. And sometimes that's like we're in that because, like, man, we screwed up. And now there's distance because of what we did. Or maybe for you, it might be drawing a healthy boundary. The point is that Jesus was serious about it. He said, forgive a lot. It doesn't matter how deep, an amount that can never be paid back. You still have to choose the forgiveness. You can't undo it. You can't unsay it. But forgiveness, even though it won't be easy, even though the relationship's saying. And I think the final thing of this is that choosing forgiveness is never a one and done thing. And I think it's part of the brilliance of Jesus saying that giant number. Because I could have forgiven somebody 5 years ago for something that happened 5 years ago, but today some thought came up in my mind. I heard a song on the radio, right? I saw a sign, and it made me think of that situation, that place, or that person, and now I'm angry again all of a sudden. It's like, oh, shoot, where'd that come from? I thought I dealt with this. And 5 years later, I have to choose again to forgive. I think so when Jesus says 77 times, it's like, hey, man, it's never a one and done thing. They may offend you a second time. Maybe it's just that one time they offended you and stepped on your toes, and you're like, I got to choose it again because I'm angry again. I'm hurt again. I'm sad again. I'm mad again. Ultimately, here is what Jesus is teaching, that forgiveness is choosing freedom, but unforgiveness is choosing chains. It will be a lot. It won't be easy. There might be a different dynamic in the relationship. But forgiveness is choosing freedom. That's what he would have for us. And unforgiveness is choosing chains. That's what you and I have to wrestle with, the soil for our soul. And as we walk through life in the years and the seasons, as we deal with family, as we deal with friends, as we deal with coworkers, as we deal with neighbors, there's no relationship, there is no person, there's no amount that should not be a reality for us. What am I choosing? Am I going to choose freedom, or am I going to choose chains? I want to end by looking back at verse 23, where we started a little bit before, where Jesus started the parable. He said, therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. What is beautiful about this whole parable, this is a very practical lesson for you and I to understand about forgiveness. Forgive a lot. Forgive even when we don't want to, when it's a really deep wound. But it's also a parallel to our relationship with God. You see, this verse tells us the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts. The king is God. And he wants to settle accounts. He wants to make things right with you and I. Because there's There is a gap in our relationship with God. There is an amount that we owe God. But like the man in the billions of dollars that he can never pay back, we can never pay back to God what we owe him for how all the wrong and all the sin and all the junk that you and I have done in our lives. We can't pay it back. We can't work hard enough. We can't tithe enough money. We can't serve enough. We can do nothing on our own to pay back. And that's Jesus is telling the gospel. This is the good news. Is that even though you and I are jacked up full of junk, the king wants to settle the accounts. The king has a desire to see things made right. God wants to see you and I, his creation, to come back into relationship with him. He wants us to be made whole again. He wants us to find freedom. He wants us to find life, as we say around here. Our goal is, our hope is that people will follow Jesus and find life. That's what God wants for you and I. Yes, for eternity, but yes, for Tuesday. Yes, in the here and now. That we would find freedom. We wouldn't find chains in life. And that God, in this story, he wants that for you and I. He wants to settle accounts. So we can work and work and work and work. But the answer is not by working. The answer is by receiving a free gift, because that's what the king did for the servant who could pay nothing back. And so when I think about an application for this, Jesus so desperately wanted to see you and I made right. He wanted to see the accounts made whole again, and for the relationship to be settled and figured out. He went on a rescue mission to this earth because he wanted that. He said, I'm going to go down there and fix this. Now, Jesus had nothing to ask for forgiveness. He was perfect, right? But yet, Jesus was seeking out forgiveness and reconciliation and wholeness. He wanted everything to be made right. And that is our calling as followers of Jesus. That just like Jesus, we need to be seeking out forgiveness. And that's two meanings. Because again, Jesus didn't have to ask for forgiveness. He was perfect. But he was seeking out, I want to see things made right. I want to see things made whole. And so Jesus shows up on the scene to do just that very thing. And that is what we are called to do. When there are accounts that are not settled, when there are things that are off, when there is beef, when there is struggle, when it's like, hey, I don't like you, hey, there's this issue, we should be on the same rescue mission that Jesus was on. Look, I didn't even do anything wrong. I'm the innocent party just like Jesus was, right? But things are not settled, and I want them to be settled. I want relationships to be made. I want freedom, not chains. And again, sometimes that relationship won't be the same. The reconciliation won't be the same. But the freedom can still happen through forgiveness, through choosing forgiveness. And then in the same way that we need to be seeking out forgiveness, sometimes not just like Jesus, but on the other side where we've done something wrong, we need to be seeking out forgiveness. We need to be falling on our face and our hands and our knees before somebody that we have stepped on their toes and wronged, that we have brought an offense to them, say, look, I was wrong. I was out of line here. I spoke wrong. I chose a wrong choice. I am the guilty party at fault here. That takes humility, which was week 1, right? That was the first good soil for our soul, was humility. That takes someone rejecting pride, rejecting chains, choosing freedom, choosing humility. I know I've offended you. I didn't mean to. Maybe I did mean to. Every situation's a little different, but the point is, if we've wronged somebody, we've got to be seeking out forgiveness. We should be broken over what we've done and how we've hurt people. We should be seeking that out. And so a question that I would just say, within all of this, if you're seeking it out, or if you're wanting to forgive somebody, what are the situations? I think the question most of us wrestle with is there someone that you are choosing unforgiveness towards? I think this is something we all have to wrestle with, because we all have those moments of anger or judgment, whether it's right or wrong, where it's like, yeah, nope, not letting go of that one. Got to hold on to that a little bit longer. So who's that person right now in your heart and mind? You're like, well, this is the one And I know that God has been asking me for years. And again, as a citizen of his kingdom, we don't have an option. The commands are clear. Forgive. The benefit's better. It's freedom, not chains. And just to add a little more weight to this, in Matthew 5, this is what Jesus said. This is how big of a deal forgiveness is. If you're offering your gift on the altar, you're bringing the best you have to God, right? And there you remember that your brother or your sister has something against you because you've done something, right? The count's not settled, something is off. What does Jesus say? He says, leave your gift, go first. First go and be reconciled with your brother or sister, and then come back. So you want to sing some songs, you want to tithe some money, you want to show up and be great at church? Jesus said, I don't care about that. What I care about is relationships, people being made right and made whole. The relationship might be different. It won't be easy. It might be for the 12th time. But that's what matters more than any gifts or anything we think we can offer to God. Sometimes that's an uncomfortable phone call. That's an uncomfortable text to begin a conversation. But that is the clear calling from Jesus. Leave your gift. Get up out of church. Go outside. Make a phone call. When we stand up to sing in a minute, some of y'all might need to go out and do that. Like literally, you need to call a sibling. You need to call a friend. You need to begin that. Listen, you've got something against me because of what I've done. And we just need to begin this conversation because as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, I don't have another option. This is what Jesus clearly commanded. And I know that I'm choosing chains and I don't want to choose that anymore. That is our calling. That is our command. Choosing to forgive and make a relationship right is greater than anything else you can give God. We've got to be reminded of that. God didn't care about those other things. We're here for each other. Gifts, money, service, great. We're on this earth because of needing each other so desperately. So that's for some of us. Some of us need to choose forgiveness. Some of us need to reject unforgiveness. But some of us, for the first time, maybe there's somebody in this room that they've never chosen to receive the gift of forgiveness from God. That this servant in the story displayed, look, I owe an amount I'll never be able to pay back. And you maybe think you've been living a good life, or maybe a not so good life, but you're trying. And it's like, hey, I'm going to do things better. I'm going to be a better man. I'm going to be a better, it's like, I'm going to just do my thing. And I'm going to try to please God, but you've never actually accepted the free gift that says, look, you owe back millions and billions, and actually you'll never pay it back, but I've got a free gift for you that will cancel the debt today, that will bring you life and freedom and healing. And that's the gift that Jesus has for everybody at every moment in the time. And today it's presented to you. And today, maybe you're in the room, you're like, look, I don't have it all figured out. I'm still a little bit jacked up, like we all are, right? But I'm willing to entertain this conversation because I need forgiveness. No wonder I can't forgive other people because I've never received forgiveness from God. I don't have His Holy Spirit within me. And maybe there's somebody in the room today that is ready to receive forgiveness from God. And so we're going to pray like we do before. So just go ahead and close your eyes and bow your heads. And if this is you, if this is not you in the room, if you're like, look, I'm good on my salvation. I am a citizen of the kingdom. My thing for you in this moment is not just to check out, but to begin asking God, like, who's the person I need to forgive? Who's the one I'm holding a grudge against? What's the relationship, the account that I need to make right within me? So you wrestle through that right now within that. God, who's the person that needs to be married? But if you're in the room, you're like, look, I've never received forgiveness from God. I've never accepted that free gift. This is the conversation you can begin to have with God. Something like this. Say, God, today I see that I'm the servant in the story. The servant owed so much. He owed millions and billions, and he could never pay it back. And you just tell God, that's where I see myself today. I have sinned. I have failed. I have messed up. I owe God more than what I can offer to make it right. I can't do it on my own. And so you just begin to confess that to Him, And through this, what you're begin to have a conversation say is, but I know that Jesus came to settle the account. Jesus came to pay the price that you and I owe, the payment that we couldn't pay. And so today I'm placing my faith in Jesus, the work he did, what he did on the cross, what he did with a perfect life, what he did with defeating death and rising from the dead. I place my faith in his work, not my work. And so that's your prayer. God, I know that I've messed up. I know that the relationship's not right, but I'm ready to make it right just by placing my faith in Jesus' work and who he is, the perfect Son of God. And today, I am realigning my allegiance to a new kingdom. Not to myself, not to this earth, but God, to your heavenly kingdom. I'm ready to receive the gifts and be a citizen of your kingdom. Jesus, that means you are Lord. You are King, not myself anymore. I'm ready to find freedom in you, Jesus. I'm ready to find life in you, Jesus. Life for eternity and life for now. Life to the full as you promised, Jesus. And so this prayer is not magical, but it is your heart's cry. It's your heart's desire. It says, I need something that's beyond me. I've tried and it's not worked. And if that's you today, if you had a conversation with God just now about that, and for the first time you prayed this prayer, not like hey, I'm re-upping because, man, I've been slacking, and that's fine, that's good. God loves you. You don't got to earn it. You don't got to work it. But for the first time, if you're like, you know what, I've never actually made a decision to follow Jesus. I've never actually placed my faith in him. I've never actually done this before. If for the first time that was you today, I want in just a second for you to raise your hand. I just want to pray over you. I say this all the time. I'm not going to ask you to come down. I'm not going to ask you to stand up. I'm not going to try to embarrass you anyway. I just want to pray over you. I know that was you. So if that was you, just in this moment right now, would you just simply just raise your hand so I can pray for you today? Say, Jesus, I'm ready to make you King. I'm ready to make you Lord. I'm ready to pledge allegiance to you, Jesus. Be a citizen of your kingdom. Anybody else? Jesus, thank you that your message of hope is for all of us who feel broken and lost, who feel rejected, and feel like we can never pay back what we owe. But God, your free gift of salvation that we can find in you, Jesus, is there for all of us. And I thank you that we came and we gathered today, we worship, we learned, and somebody just raised their hand to indicate salvation, that they are placing their faith in you, Jesus, that you are Lord, you are King. God, for this man that raised his hand, I pray that he would find himself aligned with you as King of his life. Not himself, not the world, not the culture, nothing else, but Holy Spirit, that you would overwhelm this man with your presence and your Spirit. God, change this man, free this man from the chains that have weighed him down. Set him free today, Jesus. I want to do something a little different as well while everybody's eyes are closed. Talking about unforgiveness, I realize, man, there are people right now who are hurting and broken. And there's somebody that you know that you are mad at, that you've chosen unforgiveness towards, or that you need to go and pursue to forgive you because you know you have wronged somebody. And so if I'm just going to, in a second, ask you to raise your hand. If that's you, like, look, I need God's wisdom, and I need his courage, and I need his Spirit to lead me because I know that I need to go out and try to make this thing right. Just like Jesus, I need to be seeking out forgiveness in this relationship, whether I'm forgiving or I'm asking forgiveness. And if that's you, if you know that a tough conversation is coming up for you literally today or this week, I just want to pray over you. Would you raise your hand just so I can pray over you? If you're like, man, I know I've got a tough conversation. Jesus, for those who raised their hands and those for who did just now, relationships are what we're created for, but sometimes they're the most difficult thing we obviously experience in life. We get hurt, we get offended. Sometimes we choose to be offended. Sometimes we get outright wrongfully offended. God, wherever those who are today who raised their hand this morning, God, first, thank you. Thank you for leading us as citizens of your kingdom, that we would be people who look different and that would willingly say yes to trying to see a relationship made right, an uncomfortable conversation to rip the Band-Aid off, to have a healing conversation happen. God, I pray for each individual person that, Holy Spirit, you would lead them on what to say, how to say it, when to say it. God, that you would lead and guide and direct the conversation, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how painful, even if it's not the first time. God, that freedom will begin to be found for this person. Be strong and courageous is what you said so often in the Old Testament. Be strong and courageous as we go out to battle. And we're not a physical battle, but we are in spiritual battle today. We are in sometimes relational battle, it feels like. So God, I pray that as we go out today, that we would be strong and courageous to be people who are following after you as King. And so we are on a mission to make things right. And maybe, just maybe, things can look a little bit different in our family, in our relationships at work, in this town, in this church. God, would you use the people in this building to start, as we started the service with this, start a revival. And man, if relationships aren't the thing that are going to get in the way or that are going to make that happen. God, we love you. I pray for strength and for courage for those who need to go out and do that today and have that conversation. Jesus, we're going to sing this song and worship you out of gratitude for what you have forgiven us from the depths of hell that you have brought us from. God, we love you, and we worship your name, Jesus. Amen. Would you stand as we get ready to sing?